The National Desk, America's News Now.
Hurricane Idalia fast approaches Florida's Gulf Coast, bringing with it a once-in-a-lifetime storm surge.
If this storm hits at high tide, storm surge could reach 8 to 12 feet in some areas. And so that would be a life-threatening storm surge.
Plus, the widely used medications that will be cheaper under a new plan that President Biden says is a win against Big Pharma. And the first one down. The 2024 GOP field loses a challenger as the remaining candidates jockey for a position behind Trump. This is the National Desk, America's News Now. I'm Amira David. As we come on the air, Hurricane Idalia just hit a Category 2 with sustained winds at over 100 miles per hour. As it approaches the Florida Bend, it is expected to reach as high as 129 miles per hour, reaching Category 3 status by the time it makes landfall early Wednesday morning. Along the coast, often the greatest threat to life and property is the storm surge generated. And you can see right here in the purple areas from Yankeetown to the Osceola River, the surge could be 10 to 15 feet above ground level, which is considered catastrophic. But Governor Ron DeSantis, he warns Florida residents to prepare for the worst event, even if they are not targeted directly by the storm.
You should prepare to have some time without power if you're somebody that's in the path of the storm. And by the path, it doesn't mean just in the cone, because there's going to be impacts that are going to be outside whatever the National Hurricane Center says is the path of the storm.
Meanwhile, FEMA Administrator Deanne Criswell says teams are ready to pivot to the most impacted areas immediately after the storm passes. Warehouses filled with food, blankets, and medical supplies are also ready. Criswell urges those in Idalia's path to take precautions.
Very few people can survive being in the path of major storm surge. And this storm will be deadly if we don't get out of harm's way and take it seriously. So I ask all Floridians to be vigilant and heed the warnings of your local officials.
FEMA currently has $3.4 billion in its disaster relief fund, but the recent slate of disasters with those disasters concern tonight that their fund could run dry in the next month. In response, the agency implementing immediate needs funding. That means FEMA will prioritize available funding for critical response efforts to Idalia, the Maui fires, and any other extreme weather events to come without interruption. Criswell emphasizes this is not a permanent solution and called on Congress to pass supplemental funding to make sure the agency has enough money to respond to natural disasters. And as Idalia approaches the coast, the island town of Cedar Key executed mandatory evacuations today. Before they left, some spoke with the National Desk's Danny Travis about what the island will be like when they return home.
Clear blue skies and sun shining down over Cedar Key Tuesday afternoon, an almost calming scene before the storm. But a sign entering this quiet coastal town that reads mandatory evacuation in progress is leaving anything but a calm feeling for many who live here.
I'm exhausted, but yeah, we're inherently very concerned. I don't have a warm, fuzzy feeling about this one.
Forecasters are predicting wind speeds of more than 100 miles per hour at landfall, but that doesn't seem to be what locals are worried about, rather the storm surge that comes along with it.
We've got just a non-existent continental shelf here, and we get a good storm the right way, it'll roll on into the island, and we're in trouble.
It's a harsh reality that has many questioning if they will even have a home to come back to.
If we get more than a 7-foot storm surge, there's going to be water in it. If we get 10 or 12, then it's probably going to wash it away.
Restaurants and shops along the island's main street are boarded up, tenant wood covering doors and windows.
We're boarding up windows, we're tying down boats, everything that we can get off the island in time we are. We have real concerns that Cedar Key as we know it won't be here 48 hours from now.
And despite those concerns, the community is staying resilient, writing hashtag Cedar Key Strong around town.
Cedar Keys, we're resilient folks. We're watermen and waterwomen. We've made our living here eking out an existence on the water. So whatever happens, we'll rebuild the town.
That was Danny Travis reporting. In the Atlantic, Hurricane Franklin bringing dangerous surf and rip currents to Bermuda and the southeast U.S. coast, and that's expected to spread further north over the next few days. Its wind speeds have decreased to 130 miles per hour, and it's expected to weaken even more. Franklin is not forecast to hit land in the U.S. Meanwhile, in Louisiana, at least 2 people are dead now as hundreds of wildfires continue to burn. The largest fire in the state's history, the Tiger Island fire, still covering more than 31,000 acres. The governor said the heat wave contributed to the conditions and made drought worse. But some areas have been getting some much-needed rain, and more is expected. The Smithsonian National Zoo in Washington, D.C. is still closed after it was evacuated earlier. Police say it was out of an abundance of caution. The zoo received a bomb threat through email today, immediately prompting an investigation. In Jacksonville, authorities have released details from a 911 call made by the father of the gunman behind what's been called a racially motivated attack. Over the weekend, Ryan Christopher Palmater opened fire at a Dollar General store, killing 3 African-American patrons. Now we're learning Palmater's father had called 911 concerned about his missing son, sharing with the operator that the 21-year-old had been getting psychiatric help but had stopped taking his medication. Tai Lei Chi, the man arrested for the deadly shooting at the University of North Carolina yesterday, made his first court appearance today. Chi is charged with post-degree murder and having a gun on educational property. He's accused of killing Associate Professor Ziji Yan, who served as an academic advisor to Chi. At the time of the shooting, the 34-year-old gunman was a graduate student at UNC in the Applied Physical Sciences Department. Today, President Biden hosting Costa Rican President Rodrigo Chavez Robles at the White House amid an increase in migration in the Western Hemisphere. President Biden thanked Chavez and Costa Rica for being allies and for all of their leadership with migration challenges, among other issues, including fighting organized crime. Despite their efforts, the crisis at the border continues. A fresh look at the threat of human smugglers at the U.S.-Mexico border. There's new reporting indicating the FBI is looking into a group of Uzbek nationals who were smuggled into the U.S. with the help of someone with ties to ISIS. The National Desk's Atra al-Nashar reports from Washington.
A threat at the southern border that originated in Central Asia. First reported by CNN, a human smuggling network with a member who has ties to ISIS helped transport more than a dozen Uzbek nationals earlier this year. They were allowed into the United States after seeking asylum. National Security Council spokesperson Adrian Watson tells us once the intelligence community learned of this, federal officials took swift action to track down those who were smuggled in and place them in expedited removal. Watson says, quote, "There was no indication and remains no indication that any of the individuals facilitated by this network have a connection to a foreign terrorist organization or are engaged in plotting a terrorist attack in the United States." But it demonstrates broader concerns about national security threats stemming from a broken immigration system. DHS Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas says they've made progress.
Our campaign to disrupt and dismantle human smuggling networks has resulted in the arrest of nearly 14,000 smugglers.
On Capitol Hill, lawmakers from both sides of the aisle are frustrated over sluggish flows of legal immigration following the pandemic. An outdated system unfit for the number of people who want to enter and to meet the demand for workers here in the U.S. Former acting Customs and Border Protection Commissioner Mark Morgan says this presents an opening for smugglers.
Business is good, and whatever that is, you're going to have warring smugglers and cartels fighting over those lucrative routes. You're going to have more opportunity to exploit more migrants because more of them are coming.
But according to data from U.S. Customs and Border Protection, encounters at the southwest land border this summer have been lower than they were in 2022 and 2021.
Now, Amira, the National Security Council tells me they see this as a transnational issue, which is why they're working with foreign partners to try and stop these human smuggling networks before they reach the U.S. Critics of the Biden administration say that effort doesn't go far enough.
And Atra, what do we know about how the U.S. is addressing the routes these smugglers are using to transport migrants?
Right? Sometimes it's literally about stopping them in their tracks. So last spring, the Biden administration launched a counter-human smuggling campaign. It included funding about $60 million for 1,300 personnel to surge through Latin America, closer to home, right at the southern border. But we know that this is a global problem, not just in North America and Central America. In fact, the United Nations put out a report that describes what a migrant's journey often looks like. They can go from East Africa to South Africa to Brazil to Costa Rica before they make their way closer to the United States and to Canada. And something that makes it especially difficult, according to the UN, to prosecute a lot of these smugglers is witnesses, right? The most reliable witnesses in a lot of these cases would be the migrants themselves. And we know that undocumented migrants are often to stay in the shadows when it comes to either testifying about a crime that's been committed against them or helping in a situation like this.
Surely a complicated situation. More to come on the topic. Atra Al-Nashar in D.C. for us. Thank you.
Thanks.
An Ohio lawmaker is reintroducing a bill that would require seatbelts on school buses across the state.
I think we all agree that there has to be something done. The question is, can we collectively, as both sides of the aisle agree, let's protect these children.
Ohio Rep. Cecil Thomas tried to get the same legislation in place in 2015 when he was a state senator. But Thomas says opponents argued it would cost too much money or that seatbelts could trap kids inside during an emergency. This new effort comes after an Ohio student was killed in a school bus crash last week, and nearly 24 other students were hurt. A 127-year-old water main in Times Square burst open early this morning. If you can imagine it, you look at these photos here. It was flooding Midtown Manhattan streets and New York City's busiest subway station, that of Times Square. The 20-inch water main broke under 40th Street and 7th Avenue. A city official said it took crews about an hour to find the leak and turn off the water. Subway service was paused through much of Manhattan to respond. Air pollution is a larger threat to human life expectancy than smoking. A University of Chicago study shows the most harmful impacts of pollution occur in Southeast Asia. But here in the United States, pollution in the air could still shorten Americans' lives by as much as 3.6 years. On average, California is the most polluted state, followed by Illinois and Indiana. The study uses data from 2021 and does not include the harmful impacts from the Canadian wildfires that brought hazardous pollutants to many states earlier this summer. Coming up, how gas prices are expected to change this week going into Labor Day. Then, as the country tries to get a handle on fentanyl overdoses, experts are warning of an even stronger drug hitting the streets. Then, what happened when a California man confronted thieves after multiple burglaries? We are back in 90 seconds. The crowded field for the Republican nomination for president lost one contestant today. Miami Mayor Francis Suarez suspended his campaign, dropping out of the running. He did not qualify for the first Republican debate and had not, as of yet, met the threshold for the second debate on September 27th. Meanwhile, we are getting our first good look so far at how the remaining Republican field is shaping up after last week's debate in Wisconsin. Who may have new life, and did Donald Trump skipping the events cost him any support? Chief political correspondent Scott Thuman takes a look.
With the arrests and court cases piling up, Donald Trump's numbers on the way down. The overall leader appears to have taken a hit, suddenly giving a bit more hope to his competition based on a new post-debate poll. Emerson College noting Trump's snub may open door for other candidates. Trump, who declined to attend, saw a slight dip, losing 6 points. Former Vice President Mike Pence ticked up 4, and Nikki Haley saw the biggest bump, jumping 5 points.
I think in the first 72 hours, we raised $1 million. We've had thousands of people volunteer. It only keeps us more motivated because we have a country to save.
The surge possibly for touting her foreign policy gravitas or willingness to blame her own party for some of Washington's out-of-control spending. And Pence reminded voters how he stood up to Trump on January 6th.
Almost everybody on that stage made it clear that I did my duty that day.
Even though they all still trail Trump by a large margin, they could see this as a first step, that if Trump's not going to dominate the debates, they'll take that time to build name recognition and with it, momentum. Trump's campaign team tells us he'll skip September's debate too. And as critics say Ron DeSantis fell flat on stage, a bonus for newcomer Vivek Ramaswamy, who had the largest number of respondents say he won the debate.
I believe I can take the America First agenda even further than Donald Trump did.
Though Democrats believe the more exposure these candidates have, the more ironically it will hurt them.
The party that used to wrap themselves in the flag is the party that's talking about banning books, changing the voting age from 18 to 25. They are talking about all of these things that are extreme, and that's not where the mainstream of the American people are.
But for GOP contenders, they see even the slightest change as a chance to shake up all those political predictions. In Washington, Scott Thuman for the National Desk.
All right, Scott, thank you. Job openings have fallen below 9 million for the first time in 2 years. This while the number of available jobs in the United States dropped for the third consecutive month. But this is bad news for the Fed, as a tighter labor market could lead to more interest rate hikes. Meanwhile, Americans as a whole are feeling less confident financially. The Conference Board Consumer Confidence Index fell to 106.1, down 8 points from where we were in July. Economists were expecting the number to go up. While this decline has erased the positive gains earlier this summer, the reading is nearly 11 points higher than where it was last July when it hit its recent low point. Labor Day is upon us, and if you're hitting the road this weekend, you may see slightly lower gas prices. Gas Buddy predicting the average gallon of gas to dip slightly to $3.75 a gallon, virtually identical to what motorists experienced for Labor Day last year when it was $3.78. Now, as for when motorists will be at their max, expected to be busiest on Thursday between 2 and 6 p.m. and practically all day Friday. Of course, the skies will also be rather busy. AAA says that all domestic flight bookings are up 4% over last year, and international bookings, those are up 44%. Concerns growing over illicit new synthetic opioids hitting the streets that experts say are more powerful than fentanyl. In a Journal of American Medicine, researchers found that these newer novel potent opioids are so strong they require multiple doses of naloxone or Narcan to combat overdoses versus the single dose fentanyl usually requires. Fentanyl remains the deadliest drug in the U.S., accounting for 2/3 of the more than 150 opioid-related deaths per day. A list of 10 medicines that will be cheaper in 2026 under a plan from President Biden is out now. It includes the diabetes treatment Jardiance and the blood thinner Eliquis. This comes after Medicare gained the authority to negotiate some prescription drug prices after the Inflation Reduction Act was passed. President Biden says the new prices mark a win against Big Pharma. And 3M is settling around 300,000 lawsuits, claiming they gave the military defective earplugs that led to hearing loss and ringing in the ears. The military used the earplugs in training and combat from 2003 to 2015. 3M has agreed to pay out $6 billion over several years. The company said they're not admitting to the liability and that the products are safe and effective when used properly. U.S. Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo has been in China meeting with senior officials. Raimondo says that she rejected an appeal today by Chinese leaders to reduce U.S. export controls on technology with potential military applications. But they did agree to have experts meet to help address trade secrets. The teacher shortage may be getting worse after accelerating during the pandemic. New reports indicate which states are having to see the worsened shortages. The National Desk's Angela Brown joins us now.
The Florida Department of Ed says the state has over 4,700 open teaching vacancies. In North Carolina, more than 5,000. One reason? Pay. Our team of reporters talking to educators nationwide, including Shayna Pill in North Carolina, who left the classroom after a decade.
I don't receive enough pay to put food on my table and clothe my children, and they're on Medicaid and we receive food stamps.
New information from the National Education Association says nationwide over 314,000 job openings still exist in our schools. And over 286,000 of our educators in our schools are not certified for the subject they are teaching.
And we also know that when we do not have a carified, qualified, certified teacher in front of students, it impacts their ability to learn.
Some say the teacher shortage is getting worse. Take Pennsylvania. Nearly 9,600 teachers leaving their jobs, the largest increase in the past decade. In Maine, more than 2,000 teachers and other educators quit or retired last year, the most in the past 7 years. Michelle Cook, College of Education, Clemson University.
One of the reasons why there is a teacher shortage is that sometimes folks leave pretty quickly once they become teachers. So there's an attrition rate, especially in the first 3 to 5 years.
In Washington, D.C., I'm Angela Brown.
What happened when a California man went after a group of thieves after several burglaries? We'll be right back. We are in your neighborhoods covering issues that matter most to you. We're taking the pulse of America.
After multiple burglaries, one Fresno County man decided he's had enough. In broad daylight around 1 in the afternoon, the victim says 2 women came back Monday for the 3rd time this month and stole this generator. 3 hours later, they came back for more, and he was ready.
So the victim stood by out front and watched and saw the
suspect vehicle go by and then began to follow the vehicle while he called 911.
He followed them in his car in a circle around the block.
The victim tried to position his vehicle in a way that it would block in the suspect's vehicle.
One of the women surrendered until deputies came, but the other one pepper sprayed the victim and drove away. That's why the sheriff's office says, if you see something, say something.
I'd say 60% flying, 40% studying, but you have to know just as much book smart as you do how to fly. It's not just learning how to fly a plane.
Meet Caleb Parker. He's a Frontier Airlines pilot cadet. He went through Rancho High School's aviation program, graduated UNR last year, and decided he still had that itch to fly. Carriers like Frontier are trying to make the job more attractive, creating pipelines to train pilots like Caleb, offering a 2-year cadet program.
Right now, we have 500 cadets. We're looking to double that over the next year. So the need is there.
The problem starting with a number of pilots reaching the mandatory 65 retirement age, the many retiring early once COVID hit. The Bureau of Labor Statistics estimates about 18,000 openings for pilots each year for the next decade.
Sometimes it's not even one day at a time, but one moment at a time.
Katie Eberts is getting stronger every day. She's in intense therapy at Golisano Neurology Rehab Center, relearning how to do things like taking off her shoes and getting in and out of bed. But through it all, she continues to smile.
I'm a happy girl, and I've said this a million times too, I'm a lucky girl. I really am a lucky girl. This is obviously, some people would consider this a very unlucky situation, and maybe you could call it that, but what I've seen in return from the people who support me and the people who are taking care of me is, it's lucky for sure.
Katie is celebrating every small victory with one particular goal in mind.
I really want to perform again.
And she already is. Her first time playing piano since the crash was for her audience on social media.
This is a live shot on the campus at the University of Tampa as they brace for the storm tonight and tomorrow. Join us again tonight for the evening edition of the National Desk. We're going to have the latest information on Hurricane Idalia with live team coverage from Florida. I'm Amira David. Thanks so much for watching.